systems in place. So I think that's really powerful. And one thing that I really wanted to dive into, as I was honestly doing a lot of research on you, because I've seen you do a lot of interviews, a lot of podcasts. You've done this before, you've been in the industry before. One thing that I found so interesting, you kind of mentioned briefly your paper route growing up. So I'm actually grew up in Situate, Massachusetts. So I know you grew up in Massachusetts as well. And I know you had the paper route. And what was so fascinating to me is from an early age, you built a team around you of like 10 to 20 of your buddies who are all doing paper routes with you. So I just think that's so fascinating because I've watched a lot of people, even in my own family, where you work so hard every single day, but you can work hard your whole life, but not really get to where you want if you don't really start to work smart and really incorporate. So like you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't really know how to incorporate it, you can't really do a whole lot with it. And it's really about the value that you're adding. So I'm just so fascinated from such an early age. How did that even like cross your mind to like build a team around you and start to build these systems around you? Like it really sounds like you were a true entrepreneur, like from birth. Where did this all come from?
Well, grew up in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, home of Friendly Ice Creams, JD. If you remember the Friendlies back from that area, and they're a franchise too, or they were a franchise. I think they've lost and been sold 3 or 4 times to another story on that. So great question, man. You're going to make me think. Well, I grew up in a very strict Irish Catholic family. I've got 6 older brothers and 2 older sisters and 1 little sister who's up in Raleigh now too. So again, we didn't fight, we didn't eat. If we didn't, my dad wasn't giving us allowances. Like he didn't give me a bike. We had to get our own things. If I wanted a new bike, I had to get my own things. I had to think of creative ways to do the right thing and to make a buck or two. So again, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to say this as I mature and age too, but I just thought it was common sense. Yeah. So whatever it was, forget about the paper out. Even, pre-college and college years, when I used to wait tables, we would have 4 sections or 4 tables. I think it's still done the same way. We have 4 tables in the restaurant that we were assigned, and those were my tables. Now, I thought that I really owned those tables. Yeah. I thought that, that was my living, those 4 tables. And I had to keep those 4 tables full because that's where I would make money through gratuity. Again, it's not like it was back in 1980 something when we really had to work for our tips and we had to assure that prompt, courteous service and be attentive and fill up water before we were asked and clear dishes away. Today you get 25% for taking an order. Another story for another day, right, man?
That's a really good lesson.
With that said, I mean, the hostess would ask the customers, you want smoking, non-smoking, or Paul section? and there's just little things that we could start, because as a waiter, I was a sales guy. And I was making my money based upon that 15% gratuity. And I also had common sense. Well, I want to raise that gross number up so I can make more money. And I know, again, all these things, and I'm here to help, and everybody else too. And even as you're awarding and introducing candidates to other franchises, whether it be Jantize area developer master franchise concept, or it's the Jiffy Lube, or it's a restaurant that you're representing. I mean, but the bottom line, we are all in it and listen to that radio station, WIFM, right? It's not for New England. What's in it for me? So at the end of the day, what's in it? Is it money? When I was 23 years old, yeah, I was in it for the money. Now that I'm mature and understand the human growth and the partnership, that sometimes the lifelong partnerships that you make with franchisees, and it continues to grow. I can share with you too, man, early on, I sold some territories to some guys I probably shouldn't have sold them to, but they were writing checks for $75,000, $80,000 to me.
That's all really powerful. And one of the lessons in something I heard recently in life is you got to learn to earn to return. So very similar, where you got to learn first, you got to learn these skills so that you can make that money, so that you can eventually give back to other people. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you in terms of finding that value, finding that freedom, and then really giving that value to other people. And another thing very valuable that I heard is how you're waiting on those 4 tables and how much pride you took in that. The successful people, they take pride in all these little things, because when you get these big responsibilities, you can't just develop these skills overnight. It starts with having these skills from an early age and taking pride in all those smaller things.
But I appreciate you, JD. But when I was 21 years old, or when I was 12 years old, I didn't understand pride of ownership. I understood I wanted to make money.
Yeah.
And I think money became the motivator instead of the goals that I have today as a mature adult and a mature franchisor. So again, for your early people, that, hey, we got to look at a business that's going to make money. And I got to make money fast because I got rent due. I got gas to be put in the car. And how again, those customers would come in, and JD, I would literally become friends with the 4 people at the table. Not only because I exceeded their expectations, and they wanted water. I'd say, how about a Perrier water, Mr. Smith? Oh yeah, Paul, let's have a Perrier. But guess what? That just raised my ticket level from $30 to $35. And again, I was selfish. I'm the first one to admit I was selfish. I was there to make money. But in the term, those people, they became my friends. And guess what, JD? When you're at home with your girlfriend or your wife this weekend, and my wife says it more on the weekends now too, maybe sometimes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hey, where do you want to eat? I don't care. Where do you want to eat? Want to go to here? Want to go to there? I don't care. Where do you want to go? And then we always popped up. Hey, let's go see our friend at ABC Company. So all those people who came into that restaurant in South Charlotte where I waited tables, they would sit around on Friday night and say, hey, let's go see our friend Paul at the restaurant. And literally there'd be people, we had empty tables, and people would be sitting waiting at the bar. Hey, Mr. Smith, you want this table over here? And they're like, oh, no, we'll wait for Paul. He's our friend. Well, other waiters were out back smoking cigarettes and doing whatever else they were doing and flirting with girls. I had customers literally waiting to come sit in my section. Let me expand, and this is a good little topic too, and maybe even sales 101 or franchising negative 2.0. One time, or there was a section, and it was 4 tables in the middle of the restaurant, right? And everybody hated that section. And the hostess would walk by with people, and they would all sit along the windows in the booth. And no one would sit in and I was like, hey, I need a table. It's my turn. I got to pay rent. I got to get gas. I need to make my money tonight. Yeah. And she's like, nobody wants those tables. I was like, really? What do you mean nobody wants the tables? And then I went over and listened. And the next customers, Mrs. and Mrs. Smith, the nice older couple, came, and she said to the customer, do you want to sit here, or would you rather have this booth? And guess what the customer said? I'd rather have the booth.
Yeah, 100%.
And I was like, hold it, time out. We got to stop this silliness. And I said, Sister Susie, Mrs. Hostess, the next time you seat somebody, I want you to walk over to the booths and say, you want to sit in this booth? Or would you rather have this nice table over here?
Yeah.
And guess what happened, JD? Everybody started to sit at the tables. Was that some super salesmanship? No, bro. That was Paul needed to pay his rent money at the end of the month. And I had to teach the waitress to come to my tables, because that, again, is just, it's people. It's how you talk and how you treat the people. And the words that you use could change the decisions of the people.
Yeah, that's really powerful, like what you said. And one of the topics of the podcast is really just diving into entrepreneurship. And, when you're thinking about franchising, thinking about how entrepreneurial you need to be. And sometimes people may be a certain age and think, is it too late for me to be an entrepreneur? And for myself, I grew up around an entrepreneur with my father. So it was very easy for me to understand how to take those risks. And, I'd much rather take that risk than work that 9 to 5 for 40 years. Whereas, for him personally, he was kind of very much like you, where he didn't have those opportunities. So he was very much forced to find ways to make that money. So finding ways to provide value, finding ways to take pride in giving to his customers, taking pride in all these small things. So those 2 different paths to become an entrepreneur, whether you're kind of limited on options and you have to kind of find that path, or maybe through family and you understand, you'd much rather take that risk as an entrepreneur. But for